Hello and welcome again to another session of the 18th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Hales. I'm your moderator. We have with us Vivian Secchi, who has a master's in education in instructional technology. She is currently the digital accessibility coordinator at the University of North Texas Health Science Center Division of Academic Innovation. That's a lot to put on a name tag.
Yeah.
Uh, she works to make electronic course content and other campus electronic documents accessible and ADA compliant. She serves also as the campus electronic and information resources accessibility coordinator who reviews university technology being purchased or used for accessibility compliance. And it still amazes me in this day and age, there's still people that don't understand the importance of accessibility for these kind of things, which makes your job important. So
Yeah.
Vivian, uh, she's going to talk about evaluating digital content for accessibility using the Digital Accessibility Matrix. So Vivian, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Bob. And welcome, everybody. Good morning. Um, so, my colleague, Cynthia Edwards, Dr. Cynthia Edwards, could not be here to co-present because she had a family emergency. But just to kick it off, if you either scan the QR code or click that link, or that's the link to download this presentation for you to refer to whenever you want. Okay. And if you like, I mean, I can even email you the presentation or the links, whatever you like. All right, so that's me, Vivian Secchi. I am also got a CPACC certification through the IAAP, that's the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And then my colleague Cynthia Edwards could not be here today. So just kind of some guiding questions to think about accessibility at your organization. How does digital accessibility affect my organization? What strategies can be implemented to prepare my organization to meet digital accessibility standards? So these are just some things to think about. And then one last one, what are the best practices to meet and sustain digital accessibility compliance? That's part of what this presentation is going to introduce you to. So our key takeaways today are recognize the importance of accessible materials by promoting fair and effective digital experiences. We're going to examine how to effectively use the digital accessibility matrix to evaluate and remediate digital content. This is a little tool that I created, and it's an Excel spreadsheet to kind of help you walk you through this process of accessibility. And we're going to identify accessibility best practices in digital content. And basically, most of what I do is I review course content, digital course content for accessibility for our students here at the university. And finally, we're going to use evaluation tools to detect accessibility issues. So part of the matrix that I'm providing, which is a document, there's tons of links there for tools that you can use to, check color contrast, to check to see if your image is got a pretty good alternative text. There's lots of different tools out there, so I try to collect all of that and put it all into one document. So basically, the definition of digital accessibility is the same as accessibility in general through the ADA definition. Provide users with the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as users without disabilities with equivalent ease of use. So that's the whole thing. You know, we want to be able to access digital content with no barriers. So of course, the legal milestone, you know, one of the reasons we're here is because, and that's for the ADA, sorry. Title II of the ADA was updated in April 24 of 2024. So that's where the ADA updated Title II, which had to do with web content and mobile applications. And of course, the deadline to be compliant with this rule is this year, April 24, 2026, and you need to comply with the WCAG 2.1 level AA, which we're going to look at through this digital accessibility matrix. So what is it? Haha, you know, you recognize this guy. So what is the matrix? It's a tool designed to walk the user through the process of identifying elements of digital content with remedial actions to take for optimal accessibility. So we're going to discuss the POUR principles from WCAG, and it also incorporates UDL guidelines. So this is all to meet compliance. One of the things I do recommend, and I'll give you lots of opportunities to link, but you want to download this Excel document that I created and then use it. Don't use it with the web browser. It doesn't work the same. So it's just a fair warning. Okay, so we're going to so the introduction to the DAM, Digital Accessibility Matrix. It's basically an Excel worksheet with 5 tabs. So the first tab gives you the instructions on how to use it. And I was just going to show you how that looks. So it's just a basic Excel document. Again, you want to download it, don't open it in the browser. And then so you got instructions, and then you have your other 4 tabs dealing with the perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust principles, and then how each one of those will have a checkpoint for you to check on your digital content. So each header section of the page is actually going to cover the UDL principle that it relates to, the WCAG rule that guidance that it relates to, and of course I also have a digital accessibility matrix website and a link to my email in here in case you have questions about any of this. So each of the 4 tabs that deal with perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust has a column. Each column is basically the way that you're going to walk through checking things in your digital content. So column 1 is basically what exists in your document. You know, is it video? Is it audio? Is it you know, content conveying information with colors? So we're breaking it down by each principle. And I went too far. There. Then the second column is measurement. So basically, how do I measure whether this element is accessible or not? So this is basically an explanation of like, how is accessibility measured for that element? Then column 3 is basically like a checkbox. You know, if you check the box, that means, hey, you know, my element meets this measurement that you just explained. So you just move on to the next thing. But if you don't check the box, that means that that element is not meeting the measurement yet, and you're going to come back to it. Sometimes you don't have, so also if you check the box, I forgot to say that maybe it doesn't apply because you don't have that element in your document. The next column, remediation. This explains on how to make sure that that element is accessible. So it's explaining, very clearly what you need to do to make it accessible. And then finally, whoops, I went too far. Sorry. Then column 5 is basically all the links that I was talking about, the different testing tools, the tips and services that you can utilize to make content accessible. And then finally, column 6 is basically a confirmation saying, if you did the checkbox, it'll tell you that you're done with this element. You can move on. And then red means that you're still in the process of remediating. Okay, so now let's just talk about real quick the WCAG guidelines. So right now the guidance says the rule, Title II rule is 2.1, but there is a 2.2 already created. It just hasn't been adopted as of now, but it will be probably soon, but it hasn't changed very much from 2.1. But the WCAG guidelines were published in 1999 by the W3C under the WAI, Web Accessibility Initiative. These are testable standards for making web content, including text, images, multimedia, and code, usable by people with disabilities. And WCAG guidelines are organized under the 4 key principles that you'll hear over and over again: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So guideline perceivable. So in this worksheet that I created, there are 6 checkpoints. So of course, the first one has to do with video and audio content. Content has to be color contrast compliant. Content does not use color alone to convey information. Text in any format is searchable, legible with a screen reader. Text can reflow or wrap when using digital magnification, and you want to use accessible fonts, and these are typically called sans serif fonts. So again, the first perceivable guideline, video audio. So what do you need to do? It needs to be captioned. So whether it's a podcast, a video, whatever video audio content it is, you want to make sure it's captioned because that way it makes it accessible for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. If you're using YouTube video, you always have to check the captions. A lot of those captions are automated, robo caption. They can be pretty accurate. I mean, nowadays it's pretty accurate, but you always want to make sure you check it to make sure that it is accurate. And there are ways to edit in some cases to correct those captions. But you have to set up a YouTube captioning account. I've done that, and it's if you have time, it's good. But again, always check that your video captions are good. Don't ever assume that they're ready to roll. Sometimes it's just better to choose a different video. Content uses color for text and images. So again, you want to run it through a contrast analyzer like this one. There's a bunch of links to those kind of tools in the matrix, but here's just some samples of like where the color contrast fails when they're combining 2 different colors. So like that, you see that blue on orange or orange on blue fails, green on red and red on green fails because a lot of people are color blind and they have trouble with this, or certain visual disabilities can cause issues with colors. So content does not use color alone to convey information. So, again, the colorblind issue. So if you're using, here's a sample of a short table that's using a legend that says, these items in these colors are conveying this information. So in this case, supplies are out is in red, supplies that are ordered are in blue. Well, if I'm colorblind, this is what I'm going to see. I can't tell. So you don't want to assume. So basically to just make, cover your, what is just make it a little bit more user friendly by adding another column. Like for instance, you can keep the color, but just make sure that you indicate the status of that item. So that makes it user friendly to everybody. Okay, so as far as text in digital document, uh, you know, text in an image, if the text is in an image and it's not a readable, accessible image, you have to test it with a screen reader. Can you read that image? If not, you have to add a caption or some sort of alt text to that image. Um, Text for magnification. So that really has to do with how it appears on different devices and if the text reflows. Again, if somebody's trying to use a magnifier to see something on the screen, uh, you don't want it depends on how much magnification they're using, but it can be a problem if the text doesn't reflow. Uh, but here's an example of an image that's not accessible. It was a job fair that they were announcing, but again, this didn't have alt text. It didn't have a caption, so it's like, well, how are people with visual impairments going to access this thing? So it's lots of text information. That's great, but we got to have the info in some other format. So text for magnification. So here's what I'm talking about. Here's like 3 different views of our main website for UNT Health. So here's a tablet view, a mobile view, and a laptop view. So, all those views, it's nice to test. If you can test your content or your websites by going to them on different devices, see if they're user friendly. Again, it depends on how you arrange the stuff on the screen. Um, but it's always good to test your content. And again, so if you're using a lot of text, be aware that using sans serif fonts are the most accessible, because if you're using fonts, so see, this is what serif and sans serif looks like. So serif has a lot of like little cursive things and they make it harder, not so clear to read. And then a sample of sans serif, there's one there without those little curvatures or, little items at the end of the letters. Here's a whole bunch of different, well-known brands, and they're all using sans serif fonts. They're very legible. One of the other things that you want to avoid is trying to use all caps to make some text stand out. What you really want to do is you want to avoid keyboard all caps, using the cap key to cap everything. Just use your fonts to make something stand out, or use bold, italic, underline. Don't use the caps key because that can reduce readability and cause issues with the screen reader. Oops. So the next guideline is operable. This means operable means to provide users with alternative means of navigating and interacting with content. So there's 4 checkpoints there, and there's the UDL and WCAG guidelines that you can refer to. So the 4 checkpoints are: content can be navigated or selected with keyboard only. So do not make something that requires a mouse, because that's going to eliminate some people from being able to use it. Make sure that the content is not locked or restricted from access. I come across a lot of PDFs that, yeah, have, restrictions all, for editing or for reading, what happens is a screen reader can't read it. Headings and subheadings are tagged and marked, meaning that you're able to navigate that document and know what the major structure of that document is. That's what headings and subheadings do. And then finally, tables present an array of related data and contain header columns or rows. That's going to make it clearer for the user to read and for screen readers to access. So the first one is content can be navigated with keyboard only. So you can use radio buttons, checkboxes, and fillable fields as these can be navigated with either a keyboard or a mouse. If content cannot be edited, so a lot of times I look at faculty stuff, I'll ask them, you can redo this in a different way, make it more accessible. But, that doesn't always happen. So I try to help them out as much as I can. But here's an example of a non-accessible activity. So this is a quiz that somebody was taking. They created this drag and drop the boxes to the two different columns. So here's the, you know, I guess the entries or answers, and then they're supposed to drag the boxes under each of the respective columns. Well, you can't do that in this activity. I tried doing it with a keyboard, it didn't work. You had to use a mouse. So this is not accessible. So what I did is I reformatted it so that it's the same information, but I just formatted it a little bit differently. But you get the same results. Here's the little gray boxes numbered, and then basically, okay, so which category does it fall under? And then these are check boxes, so they get to choose. So a lot more accessible that way. Again, avoid using locked or restricted access scanned or image-only text documents. What happens is screen readers cannot read that content. It will not read it. What I typically do is search for the same information from other sources, like a university library. We have a big library. They can source a lot of stuff in accessible formats. The other thing is I've often reached out to the author or the publisher of the work to provide accessible versions. By law, they have to do that if it's to provide, access to a person with a disability. So they should provide accessible versions. So again, here's like a very poor scanned image. The other thing you can do, you can try, but it takes a lot of work, is you can try to scan and OCR this content, but it does require a lot more work on your part, but it's like my last resort. If I can't find it anywhere else, then yes, I'll do this. But you have to, basically make sure that everything's spelled correctly and it matches the original document. And then headings and subheadings are tagged and marked. So why is that important? It's important to use styles, like for instance, in Word documents, to identify headings, H1, H2, H3. A lot of people myself included, in the old days, I used to just center content, a heading, or emphasize it and not designate it as H1, H2. And that basically gives your document no structure to navigate it. So I'm going to demonstrate that right now. So here's a document. It's got multiple headings. I mean, right there, I can identify a heading 1, a heading 2, a heading 3 right there. So what you want to do is you go to your styles in Word and, highlight that and say, this is my heading 1. And I usually say heading 1. I don't call it the title of the document because a lot of people are saying, oh, title and heading 1 are the same. It's like, no, it isn't. So the heading of this document, heading 1, is Cochrane Pro Chapter 18. And what that does is, so if I hit view and turn on my navigation pane, back up. and turn on my navigation pane, what happens is you basically are giving this document an outline structure so you can navigate your document by those headings. You know, if somebody says, well, you know, here's a 200-page doc that you want to read, but you want to go back and look for a specific part that you're supposed to read, you can navigate that using that. It's a lot easier than say, you know, I got to do a search or scroll through, you know, you're going to waste a lot of time like that. So this gives it a lot more structure for everybody concerned, somebody with a screen reader, somebody with you know, cognitive issues. It's an easier way to navigate a document. In a PowerPoint, and this is important, you want to set your slide titles. So if you open up a brand new PowerPoint template, the first thing you're going to want is to put a slide title in this thing. And you can do that through, and we'll talk about more about this, is through your check accessibility and add a slide title. So what does that mean? So in the view for PowerPoint, there's an outline view. If you put a slide title on every slide, it's going to show up in this outline view, and then you can navigate that document and know which slide has the information you need. So it's a lot nicer to navigate it that way. Tables. So there's some rules to tables. Designate a header, row, or column. That's standard practice. Place titles outside the table, not within. You'd be surprised how many people put the title of the table inside the table. And it's like, no, that's the very first row of your table should be your header row, not the title of your table. And the other thing is don't mix merged cells with unmerged cells because the screen reader has a lot of trouble navigating that information. And I think some, you know, some folks may have trouble like figuring out this whole, you know, merged and unmerged cells. I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. So here's a good example. So if you're in Word and you create a table, the first thing you want to do is go to table design, check that header row box. And if you have a header column, then check that too. But then here's like an example of a good table. You know, it's got the title outside of the table, not inside. The first row has row headers or row labels, and you designate that as the header row. So here's the other thing you want to do. There's also something called table layout. You want to make sure, because if this table repeats across pages, you want to make sure that the header row is repeated on each page. So that's just common good practice for everybody. Okay, here's a funky little table, very bad. The table titles within the table. So what happens is that first row is supposed to be the header row, not the title. Then what happens is the second row is supposed to be the header row, but you can't designate the second row as a header row. The other thing is if you look at this thing, I mean, it's got all kinds of bizarre merged cells, and it makes it really difficult to navigate something like this. Also, if you're inserting like blanks within the table, just leave it blank. Don't put dashes, you know, leave it empty or just say no information, because just dashes is not going to give the reader any good information. Okay, the next guideline is understandable. There's 3 checkpoints for these. So basically, URLs and links use meaningful text or labels. Appropriate language is used for the target audience, and add alt text with description of an image, graph, or chart. So URLs and hyperlinks use meaningful text or labels. What does that mean? So don't do this. Click here, underline, and that's where the link is for the UNT Health homepage. A better way to format this would be just to, here's the link, UNT Home Health page. You know, the screen reader is going to read that and say, this is a link, UNT Home Health page, click. You know, versus like the screen reader would say, click here. And it's like, Okay, for the UNT Health homepage. So this is a better format to do all the links in. And also, you know that a lot of links, if you put HTTPS, if you put the whole thing like that, I mean, the screen reader is going to read the whole thing, and it's like it would probably drive somebody insane. But in Word, you basically say insert a link, and then the text to display will be the text, understandable, meaningful text, and then you put your URL address down here at the bottom. So this is how you do it. Language appropriate for audience. So just be aware of the language you're using. So this is one of the WCAG guidelines. Know your audience. So make sure you're using the appropriate language for that audience. Avoid jargon that people might not understand. Use as plain language as you can. Consider the context, adapt for the formality of the situation. Be inclusive. Avoid language that might exclude or offend. And then again, seek feedback from your target audience to see how you can better communicate this information. And then images, graphs, and charts. So images, graphs, and charts need descriptions or alt text. If it's not in the surrounding text, like a lot of times in PowerPoint, you can put it in your notes. If it's really complicated concept, describe it in your notes. If you've got audio in this slide, and a lot of our teachers and faculty use audio, make sure it's captioned. And again, if the images need to be explained, then do alt text. There's a lot of decorative images too, lines and stars and that kind of thing. You don't have to describe those things. If the image is decorative, lines, icons, etc., mark it decorative. So here's an example. So this is a basic pie chart with a basic legend. So it's using the colors to identify the specific type of pie, and it's got the percentage in there. Well, again, if I was trying to use a screen reader, or maybe it's not as understandable for people who have some cognitive issues. I mean, it might be difficult to discern what this graph is trying to convey. Here's a better way, or more way, better way to do it. So basically, if the information fits within the pie area, so I just combined the percentage with the name of that section, but also I added alt text to this image and basically gave it the same information. So this covers all fields, all areas for anybody who might be trying to access and, understand this graph. A lot of times, and again, all of these things have links in the matrix. Like if you have, there's one about data visualization, which has to do with, if I have like a very complex chart, maybe it's a map. The alternative to a map or complex chart would be a table. So that would be the alt text, provided as a different link or as different text to give you the same information, because it's very difficult to try to understand everything that's in a map or a complex chart. Okay, the final guideline is robust, which means that content can be accessed on various devices, platforms, and with assistive technology. So there's just basically two checkpoints. Content functions on a variety of user devices and platforms. Content works with assistive technology. So explore different platforms. Try your content on different devices with different platforms. We mostly, we use a combination of Mac products and regular PC products, but we make sure that it's all tested out. So if you can test it out on all these platforms and devices, that means anybody can access your content. One of the things that you always want to use are the built-in accessibility checkers. So for instance, in Microsoft, they have, so Word, PowerPoint, Excel, all of those are the three major ones that we use. They all have accessibility checkers. So the only thing is they make sure that your Microsoft Office is up to date because they do update that tool quite often. So just check that it is up to date. So to find that accessibility checker, it's always under the review in your ribbon, and you want to click on check accessibility. And what pops up is a list of issues with your document. So it's going to find out if you're missing alt text, if you're missing audio or video subtitles, if you're missing a table header row or table headers. In the case of PowerPoint, if you're missing a slide title. Now, this finds a lot of problems, including color contrast, but sometimes there's things it doesn't find. So that's why the digital accessibility matrix helps, because it's going to identify things that maybe the accessibility assistant didn't. But definitely use the accessibility checker to fix your issues, and you fix them live. As you're running this thing, you can fix them right there in your document. Acrobat is the same way. So PDFs, the main issues are missing tags and missing alt text descriptions of images. So there's an accessibility tool built into Acrobat. And when you open that, the main two things that I always check is auto tag. If there's no tags in this document, or even if there are tags in this document, sometimes I just run it again to see if it does a better job. If I have an older version of a PDF, most of the time what I get is no tags, and your document's not going to be accessible without any tags. That means tags meaning, header tags, it's a table, it's a figure, all of that stuff. So auto tag will put it all in there. The other thing is, when I do have identified all the figures and images, I want to make sure that either it's decorative, if it's just a bullet or a line or something that showed up as a figure, I'll just mark it decorative there by checking that decorative figure box, or put in my description right there. And again, your description needs to be short. I think it only allows for like 120 characters is the max. But those are the main things in PDF: tags and text, alt text. And again, if there's going to be folks using assistive technology, what I mainly use is a screen reader to test my content, and of course my keyboard. So I'll use both of those things. If I can utilize both of those to navigate that digital content, then I pretty much know it's accessible. There are other assistive devices for auditory, motor, like switches and that kind of thing, dictation apps. And of course, there's also cognitive assistive technology. So here's just a list of accessibility tools and services. The one that I want to point you to right now is, of course, there's a link for the UNT Health Digital Accessibility Matrix. You can download it anytime. And then there's the other tools there. Also, we use a learning management system here. We use Canvas for ours. And there's different tools or LTIs that you can add to Canvas. Like I use Anthology Ally, and it gives me a score on the content. It'll tell me and point to the documents that are problematic. And then if you want to explore more web accessibility tools and services, there's a free one there through the W3C. Feel free to use that. Accessibility trainings and certifications. So I want to point you to, we're going to launch our accessibility micro-credential in March. So we're getting ready to launch that. There's a link there. It's a form. In case you're interested, you can get more information about the launch. And it's a very low cost item. I'm trying to see about getting a grant to see if I can get like the first 100 users to take it for free. So be on the lookout for that. And again, if you want to get, go further, deeper dive, get certification like I did, you can go through IAAP that have like 5, maybe 6 different certifications now. And CAST UDL also has credentials that you can get on UDL. So conclusion, the importance of accessible materials and digital experiences, how to effectively use the digital accessibility matrix to identify, evaluate, and remediate content, key accessibility best practices to ensure digital content is usable for our users, and we've learned the value of evaluation tools in detecting and addressing accessibility issues appropriately. So just real quick, I think we have a couple of minutes. I created some practices and you can either use the QR code or there's a link to the practice there. But what we're going to do is we're going to access this Google folder that I created. It's got like 5 different little activities. You can open up an inaccessible document, use the DAM to identify 2 barriers in the document and how these would be remediated. So I'm just going to click on that real quick. So here's like 5 little documents I created. So here, let's do this infographic here. This is a quick example. So here's an infographic. And as you can see, when I'm like hovering over it, this is not accessible. So if I turn my screen reader on, it's not going to read anything. And as far as I know, this does not have alt text either. So this is not an accessible infographic. And people love to use infographics. That's great. But you got to remember to add the alt text to all these infographics. So the way to, and I'm going to show you, I have also the suggestions here of how I would fix that. So here's a remediated one. So here's the alt text that I would add to this, explaining what it means. This infographic shows the following data, the title of it, Texans with a Disability, and then each bullet point just has exactly the same information there. So this is basically an accessible document now. All right, so there's other ones that you can practice with there on your own. And then here's another one, same kind of thing. So just go through that and practice on your own. And of course, I provided the final suggestions. So here's a list of some resources that we provided. Again, if you're one of the things that Cynthia, my colleague, and I did is we wrote a chapter for an OER book, so it's free. The link is right there where it says Advancing Accessibility, Chapter 11. We talk about the digital accessibility matrix. So it's an entire book all about advancing accessibility. So I highly recommend you go there. We've got a digital accessibility matrix website that you can go to. And as I'm updating the matrix, because there's always new links to add, you can go there anytime and download that. I also have tutorials for each one, how to use it. And just additional information here for your reading pleasure. So again, thank you for your time and dedication to accessibilities. If you have questions, you can reach out to me, Vivian Secchi, or to Cynthia Edwards. Anytime, I'm here to help. Any questions?
Yeah, Marlo had a question. If you could show the QR code at the beginning.
Sure. There you go.
Great.
So yeah, you can download this PowerPoint either through the link there or through the QR code. And if anybody ever has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Any other questions? I highly recommend that you look into the micro-credential too, because that's going to cover all of this content, and it's going to have a lot of assignments by the POUR. So it'll have like assignments for you to actually remediate documents, and so it'll be a really good hands-on practice. So if you've got, people that are new to your organization and they have to do, document remediation, it's a good one to take.
And there's Marlo. Hi. Oh, I love you've got like a halo of lights.
Thank you. This was really helpful.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. I will be doing other presentations at other conferences. So right now I'm scheduled to do a presentation for the Texas Distance Learning Association. Um, there's another one in Austin, Texas, but I know that I'm also looking at accessing higher ground. That's not till fall and other. So look out for me and Cynthia. All
Well, I
right, everybody.
appreciate it. Uh,
Thank you for having me.
accessibility is important to me. I happen to be hearing impaired, um, and have just tried to be sensitive to it and promote it. And it still amazes me how faculty don't really often care about it at all.
Yeah,
And,
that's a constant battle with me. Yeah. Well,
and
thank you for the invitation, Bob. Hope to do it again next year.
okay, well, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording.